Hey everyone, welcome to the first podcast of Nerds and Friends, where myself, Josh Lindquist, and my co-host, Carrie Duvall, we are nerds and we will bring on our friends and just hang out with them. So welcome to the first podcast here.
Should be a fun time. We're joined by William Shaw out in Denver, Colorado. And Will, first question for you. When did you know you were a goddamn nerd?
I believe that was beaten into me by bullies back in elementary school.
Tell us more about that. Or don't, we can move on. Your call.
Question two.
I think you guys were late, but it was just me. I'm being told. Never mind.
Can you go ahead and turn up your audio just a little bit, actually?
Yeah.
Much better. Much better. Thank you, Will. But yeah, so beyond being a nerd, tell us when you realized you were a goddamn talented artist, because your artwork is fantastic. I love all the stuff I've seen. So how did that become one of your artistic passions?
Oh, well, thank you. I very much appreciate that question. Being an artist, like, it's just something that I always did. Like, I started drawing back before I remember. I'm told that, like, I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil or a crayon, and so just started that when I was young and just always kept it up over the years. I started just picking up things, just doing it for fun when I was supposed to be doing things at school. And then probably around 10 years old, I started doing digital art on Photoshop, and
Nice.
just kind of evolved from there.
That's awesome. So is Photoshop the main program you use to do illustrations now?
Nowadays it is, just because it's way more convenient just to work in an entirely digital workspace.
That makes
Uh,
sense.
I used to, starting off, I would always start with the traditional base and then just try to upload everything into Photoshop for colors and edit. But yeah, as the technology's progressed, it's just much easier to keep everything in just that one platform, because I can go from sketching to a finished product without having to switch around or try to change the medium that I'm utilizing.
That's really cool that you can keep everything in the same digital workspace and do it there. That's fantastic. How well did you have to kind of focus on making an effort to learn about all of the digital and kind of like the housekeeping stuff on your computer to make that work, or I'm just kind of coming in as a layman with terms of illustration, you know?
For
Yeah.
for the audience who obviously doesn't know this
Yes.
advanced stuff that we all are privy to, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, it's weird with Photoshop specifically. I've actually, since I've been using it for decades now, it's just kind of been second nature for me to use. Mostly when I'm switching programs, like if I go to using Autodesk, or recently I've started 3D modeling and trying to learn the work environment in Blender. That's a big challenge that I have to spend a lot of time trying to work in that environment to actually get used to the different tools. Um, it's really kind of just a interesting process trying to go into those other work environments, and trying to learn from other artists who have been using those programs for years, to try to actually get into utilizing those type of tools that have become second nature for a lot of people. It really just kind of shows how much of this information just tends to be on the back of that's a terrible, was almost a terrible metaphor. I don't know what I'm going with this.
Mixed metaphors away, man. It's probably going to be my catch here.
Well, yeah, that's fascinating though that you're learning these Photoshop's like your home base where you have everything second nature, and then trying to expand into other mediums. I figure that's pretty challenging. And it's kind of, do you watch like lots of videos online of people who do use it to get like tips and tricks, or what are some of the ways you've kind of, or do you just go and play around in it and create artwork within it? And that's kind of how you learn shortcuts or technical stuff. I'm curious about your process there.
Yeah, well, when I'm trying to learn something new, like I always try to just jump in and play with it, but that doesn't really end up working very well. YouTube though has become, especially in the last 10 years or so, there's just so much information and knowledge just in one place there, and so it's just become so easy to find somebody who knows how to do what I want to do, and to find like a tutorial or to find a walkthrough on how different people go through these programs, and that's basically how I've learned, like trying to learn Premiere, Blender, uh, even trying to learn Zoom or Discord now, and this last year, just to keep in touch with people and to try to do everything digitally. Uh, that's really just been my go-to, is just, well, somebody's done this on YouTube, right?
There you
Well,
go.
speaking of programs, so we know what essentially like your language is. We know it's like you're a digital artist. You're learning a whole bunch of digital platforms. What's your genre? Like what kind of things do you like to draw? What do you dream about drawing?
Ooh, hey. So what I've been doing a lot of recently is a lot of fantasy art, largely based around like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinders, just that type of sword and sorcery type things, because that's what's been getting me a lot of attention on social media, to try to just drive views to my work. As far as like what I like to work on, it's all over the place. I mostly just kind of change what I want to work on based on what I'm seeing a lot of, what kind of mood I'm in. Um, I've gone all the way from like very traditional portrait painting to, I've done caricatures, fantasy, sci-fi. It's really just whatever I'm got in my imagination at the time is what I want to be working on. Um, but really, it kind of just lately it's been more dependent on what is going to be getting me either attention or going to be getting me commissions or clients, so that way I can actually keep doing what I like to do. And so uh, a lot of just what I tend to do is just entirely driven by uh, what people want to see from me.
That makes sense, because that's one of the hard things about being an artist is it's not like other jobs where you can just start at a certain position and then work your way up a defined, chain of command. You've got to really get that recognition and bring in clients and attention kind of on your own initiative. So that's really smart how you're approaching that.
Yeah, and it's kind of the drawback to doing freelance is that you have to bring in all of those views, no matter what you're trying to do. If somebody's not willing to pay for you, then there's just no money there.
Yep.
Well, how about this as a question then? If money was no object, what would you want to draw specifically, or what would you want to do with your drawing?
I would probably want to dedicate full time to actually creating comics. And that's what I've been working on doing for like 15 years. I started working on some of my own comic stuff when I was back in high school, and it's just kind of developed from there. Problem is, I'm only really good at the drawing part. I'm not a very good writer. And so that's been really the sticking point of constantly trying to write and rewrite, and I can get the visuals done, but the all of the important parts are much more difficult.
I would argue that the artwork is an extremely important part of the comic book. So don't undercut yourself there, because yes, spoiler alert for the audience, we are currently the three of us collaborating on a comic book, and it's coming along amazingly, because Will is a versatile wizard when it comes to drawing. So everyone should remember that, and we'll be hopefully announcing that in the near future, which is very exciting.
I think
Very
there's
much so.
value there of if you're able to draw, then that doesn't seem like the very valuable part of the process. As somebody who can draw, like it's I certainly understand the value of art, but there's I put a lot of stock in the ability to write coherently.
Which hopefully I do. You can give me feedback on that.
Oh,
Yeah, well, full transparency too. Will's helping me out on a, I've got a novel idea that I'm wanting to turn into a comic, and Will's my bouncing board. And like, there's a very specific reason for that. It's because, Will, whether you think you're a decent writer or not, you've got a very interesting grasp of how to world build in a way that, like, I knew you were a good artist, but then I started working with you on our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and you churned out, like, I gave you, like, hey, do you want to join with the character, and you turned out a backstory, a city, religions, like concepts, and like all this very complete stuff. Like what drives that? What's the because you seem to have a fascination with it in a very, like, you're very in depth with it.
yeah, definitely. So as far as like I got into mythology when I was like 3, 4. My I think it was probably my grandpa gave me a book on mythology for children, and that's how I started to learn about like Egyptian and Greek and Norse mythology. Very like very broad strokes and largely inaccurate, but it was enough that little toddler me was absolutely fascinated. And so as I got older and got access to better sources, I started learning about just different types of mythologies, the different types of pantheons and structures of various religious groups, be it the Egyptian, which for a long time was my favorite, and then Greek, Native American, uh, different types of Asian religions, like Shinto and Hinduism, as well as some of the mythologies from like I'm spacing out on country names. I'm not a geologist or geologist.
And it
You're
seems
definitely not a geologist. Yeah.
it seems
Don't
like a
know
lot
shit
of
about rocks.
the Gaelic religions, or kind of the spirituality there, has been an influence in the Dungeons and Dragons campaign we've been doing.
Yeah, so that was kind of the big starting point when I was going to hop in the campaign. I knew I wanted to play cleric, and I just kind of went through my head of, okay, I want to let's do a death cleric because that's fun. Okay, let's go through the different death gods, and I kind of settled on the Auron, the god from the referenced in the Mabinogi, and kind of built off of that mythos to try to think of, okay, these are elves living underground, and just kind of going through that. That's stuff that I absolutely love to do, just that world building and the design, where it's all just well, what I think of it is would be more of the wallpaper of storytelling.
Mm.
Being able to just to tell stories just from like the environment or how things would have developed, what kind of with specifically the D&D world, I was thinking, okay, like what kind of architectural influences, what kind of language would they be uh, having there? What would they eat? What kind of animals they do? What kind of uh, if I want to have this like kind of chaotic society, how can I build on that? And that's stuff that I think comes like it's just so much fun to play in that type of thing. And in a way that kind of ties back to art when you're trying to like design characters. Just like the little things are really what sell things. So like, what does this character have on its belt? What kind of sword do they use? What does that say about them?
That's really cool.
Yeah,
And where did that kind of thing come from? Like building a backstory of like what would drive a character to have this particular look is it's one of those things I've seen over and over on your Instagram specifically. I feel like I'm being a bad interviewer because I know both of you too well. But it's one of those things I see over and over on your Instagram specifically is you'll just kind of come up with a character, and the most interesting things about the character are the things that actually get me asking the questions like, well, I want to know more about this. And kind of a like one of my favorite things with comics is kind of the peek behind the kimono bits where like the Mike Mignola comics, all the Hellboy and BPRD comics. I remember reading those about 10 years ago, and there's one thing that always stuck with me, how in one of the first issues of the Plague of Frogs arc, uh, they open up like the beginning of the comic book itself is actually like a dossier, like an old World War II dossier, and
That's
it's got
cool.
all these black and white photos and sticky notes and everything. And there's one photo. It's almost like a cryptid. It's a blurry photo of a dude hanging off an airplane wing, and his head is on fire with like black flame. And it literally on the sticky note, it's got parentheses black flame question mark, and that wasn't a character that they had come up with. It was just something cool. Didn't have an idea for it. And then the next series, they made up a reason to continue working this character, and they elaborated on it and gave him a story in a like the true horror movie fashion, like that. But the cool thing was like you read the end of it, they were like, oh yeah, we didn't have fucking anything on the Black Flame until we were like, well, that guy's cool. Let's build him out.
Nice.
yeah, and sometimes like that's uh, especially when you're doing design work, those little like nuggets that you find while you're digging through. Like I've had that happen before too, where you're just in the middle of working on something and either you make a mistake or you just make some careless brush stroke or something. You just see something and it's like, I kind of like that. Let's let's see where that goes. Doing those sorts of things, it's really just kind of grabbing what you have and just kind of running with it. It's basically just visually yes anding the whole process of okay, this is what I have, and let's go from there. Let's say we put and I've done this before where like I'm like okay, this part of the picture it's a little bare, so I'll just like do a little scribble here. Maybe that's some sort of text. But, that kind of looks like a bell. What if I do put a bell there? And let's do some tassels, and that kind of gives it like a little bit of an Asian flair. What if I pull some more of that in and give this character like do a kimono type where the shirt is layered, or uh, go with bigger flowy sleeves, or those sorts of things where it just kind of builds off of little things, and it's just it's a lot of just kind of following where the process takes you.
That sounds like a very fun symbiotic relationship where you and the process are kind of collaborating with each other and just building things. That's really cool.
Yeah, when you get into that mind state, it's basically like meditation where you're not really thinking about what you're doing anymore, at least not in the same conscious way uh, that you typically do. Like
Right.
when I'm starting off a picture, when you're thinking about like design, value, structure, anatomy, that's a lot of conscious thought. But when you're just going through and trying to like make new things or tell a new story, at least with a single illustration, uh, you kind of get into a mindset where you're not really separate from the process anymore, or at least that's how it is for me.
That's
Where
cool.
you're just kind of doing this thing, and then suddenly a couple hours have passed, and
And it's like rejuvenating and fulfilling, right?
yeah,
That's awesome.
getting those. That's the best part of drawing is when you just kind of get into that, get into the zone, and then just time flies by, and that's really when you get to be the most. Well, sometimes it's when you can be the most productive. Other times it's like, well, I just wasted 4.5 hours on this project.
But no, it's not wasted. It is kind of like meditation. I found that with writing where once I call it in the zone, but when you're writing and it doesn't feel like you're, willing yourself to write, you just are in it. And that's a really powerful place to be in. So sounds exactly like what you're doing with the art. That's really cool.
Oh yeah, I can relate exactly because I was telling Will about this. I think it was the day after Christmas. I was writing a chapter in the book, and I was writing some dialogue between three characters, one of whom is one that Will came up with, and two of them
Nice.
are mine. And I I I texted him and was like, I'm writing this conversation right now, and like it's one of those things where I almost don't know where it's coming from. But these three characters have such distinct and opposing personalities in just the right way that the dialogue is really working. And it's such a good feeling.
Yeah, it's the best. So, Will, what are some of your goals? You talked about making comic books. Is there a certain, we've talked you're really proficient in all genres. Is there a certain genre you really want to do a comic book in eventually someday?
Going back to this to one that I've been writing since high school. It's as it started off about as like cliche as you can, where there's vampires with an underground society, and the main character who has some type of special whatever was poorly defined at the time gets involved with them, and that's kind of evolved from there. And so that story doesn't really share as much as it with where it came from as it could have, but it's set modern day, and that's just a lot of fun uh, to play around with things that are happening now, because it's a little bit of living vicariously through characters like that, where like I'm never going to be able to like run up the side of a building in New York City, but I can write a character that can, and I can certainly draw it.
There you go. That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a really cool comic. I can't wait to read it one day. That'll
Mm,
one day.
right after I finish writing it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Will, this is really helpful and informative. And in the video, we'll have your Instagram. But just if you want to say it to the audience, what's your Instagram handle so they can check out your artwork?
Yeah, it's at Will Shaw Art. It's the same on Instagram and Twitter.
Very cool. Well, Carrie, do you have any other questions for our guest? I'm feeling like we got a lot of the creative process and a great insight into your work.
I'd have one kind of short question, but you can elaborate on this if you want. If someone was going to hire you freelance, and let's say they contacted you on Instagram, like what's the what's your preferred way to work with a client? Would it be like they give you some very exact specifics about what they're looking for, or do you like a general idea and them and bounce drafts off them? What's your favorite way of working with a client?
So, uh, it depends a lot on the project. Like, a lot of the work I end up doing is not stuff that I would typically do. Like, I've done posters for a couple of organizations here in Denver, and with those, I get the specifics and just knock those out. It's basically just art and a little bit of graphic design for the lettering and titles. There are a lot more fun projects where I like to collaborate, like when I'm working on comics with you guys. Those are a lot of fun to collaborate on, and if it's something that I'm invested in, that's definitely something I want to work for. Uh, Mostly client work just comes down to and client work might be a little bit harsh. Mostly when I'm doing just like commissions on Instagram, it's I have this character and I want it done this way. And it's okay. I'll charge you X number of dollars for that, and that's basically the extent of most actual client work when I'm not actually collaborating with somebody on something larger. I will say it's a lot more fun to be actually invested in the final project, because there's just an actual goal that I'm working towards, and a vested interest in seeing this project come to fruition. Aside from just hey, I really want other people to get work from me as well, and so I want to make sure you have the best thing too.
Nice. That's very
Very
cool.
cool.
I imagine it feels really good when someone says, dude, you nailed my character. Like, you got it done perfectly. I imagine that's a great feeling.
Yeah, that is especially like when you if you send somebody a first draft and they're like, that's exactly what I wanted. That's perfect. It is really nice. It's a little bit. Sometimes it's when you're trying to get feedback or trying to figure out a direction to go. It can be a little bit uh, unwelcome when the only feedback you're getting is, "Oh yeah, that's great." But
Right.
I guess there's kind of a difference there, I guess, between like, "Oh yeah, that's great," and man, you nailed that, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you got to, yeah. I mean, I suppose you have to be a little bit more comfortable probing, because um, you've asked me for direction on a couple of our pieces at this point, and I've been like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I know like I'm always just freaking excited to see whatever it is that you put together. But if you need a direction and you're just like, hey, Carrie, why don't you fucking like tell me how this is supposed to look? Like, oh, okay, yeah, I got you.
Yeah, sometimes, and yeah, talking to friends, that's always great when you can just relax and you have a relationship that you can do that. Working with there've been a couple of people where I've been trying to work on them, a few larger projects, and I'm sending out work. I send them a few different thumbnails, and you get back, oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. And any feedback? Nope. Keep working.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see that.
So,
I've had writing clients like that before for freelance writing, where it's like,
Yeah.
I'm asking for feedback because I want it,
mm-hmm.
So I get that feeling.
And then of course you get to the final image and send them a, that's not really what I wanted.
Yeah. It's like, you should have told me before I did the work, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
The joy of freelancing artists.
That is always why you write in the set number of revisions. As I've
True.
learned when I'm sending out contracts to people or for commissions or larger projects of, okay, you get X number of revisions depending on how much you want to pay. Anything else, paying for extra hours support.
There you go.
Smart. Very smart. Well, Will, thank you so much for being an awesome guest. I'm out of questions. Carrie, do you have any more for our guest, Will?
No, I'm out. That was awesome, man.
Awesome.
Very nice to talk with you and get a little peek into your process and everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for helping us have our first podcast. This is Nerds with Friends, and looking forward to the next time. Will, this is not the last time we're going to have you on. We're going to have you on again in the future because you're awesome. Carrie, thank you for being a great host, and we'll see you guys next time.
That's what I'm here for.